first book that I read in July, I actually checked out from the library and I've already returned it. It was Vacation Land by Meg Mitchell Moore. I checked this one out because in June I read Mansion Beach, and I like I mentioned in my last video, I liked Mansion Beach, and then the ending couple pages, chapters, I truly still am thinking about it most days. And so I decided to check out her other books. I checked out Vacation Land. I read it fairly quickly. I didn't love it. I think I would give it a 3-star review. It is about a woman and her 2 kids. She like may or may not be on the brink of divorce. She goes back to her parents' house, maybe in Maine. I actually can't remember. And for the summer, she's supposed to be writing a book. She was on sabbatical, but there's some tension between her and her husband. Her husband isn't coming, and it follows the different family members. There is a little bit of a twist because this woman, it follows the main character's view and then also follows this other woman's view, who you can tell is kind of stalking the main character and her family, but you're not sure why, or like how dangerous it is. So it follows those 2 perspectives for the most part. Occasionally it'll be like the grandpa's point of view or the grandma's point of view or a different character's point of view. I thought it was well written. I didn't love it. It felt ordinary and not something that really stuck with me. I can hear my kid on the baby monitor right now. It was just kind of an average book. I don't regret reading it. I checked out one more of her books to read, but I will be talking about that in a minute. But I don't think I'm going to be checking out a ton of her other books. The next book that I read in July was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I know that this has been out for a while, and a lot of people in my life have read it and really liked it, but I don't know what was turning me off. I just wasn't reading it. I felt like I hadn't read a really quality book in quite a while, and I was in like a little bit of a reading slump. I was reading, but I don't think I was loving a lot of the books that I was reading. And my sister Erin is really good at recommending books. Like, she'll ask you what kind of book you're looking for. She'll ask you what your last favorite book that you read was. And so we just kind of chatted, and she asked me if I'd read any of Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I hadn't. And she was shocked. She was like, the only reason I didn't recommend The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was because I assumed you'd read it. And her and my other little sister Sasha had both at separate times recommended reading this. And so I did read this one. I was very impressed. I think I was nervous about how big the hype around it was, that it wasn't going to live up to what people said it was. I really, really loved it. I think I'd give it like a 4.5 or 4.75 star review. The only thing I will say is that it talks about sex more than I typically have in a book. My favorite books, I feel like, are typically completely clean. I don't really feel like it had any sex scenes though. Not that I can remember. It just like talked about sex a lot. I mean, she has 7 different husbands, and it's going through her motives behind each husband, and so it does mention that. That is just something to know, but I really loved it. I would recommend it to people. I would probably reread it. I'm very excited for the next Taylor Jenkins Reid that I read. I'm curious which one I'm going to read next. One of my sisters recommended Malibu Rising to read next, and the other that I talked about this with recommended Daisy Jones and the Six, and then my sister-in-law was like, no, you've got to do Malibu Rising. Most likely it's gonna be Malibu Rising, but I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Okay, as I was editing, I felt like I needed to correct myself on a few things. So the first edit that I have as I'm editing is that in The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, there were sex scenes. I think there were 2 or 3. I will say none of them felt graphic. None of them felt like they were sex scenes to be sex scenes, but they felt like they were plot driven and moving the plot forward and always completely justified. There are sex scenes. It's not a completely clean book by any means at all, but it is, I do feel like those scenes were justified through the writing, and I don't feel like they were ever crude in the way that some sex scenes are in other books I've read. So that's the first correction. Okay, I was on a tear the other day, which is, it needed to happen because there's so many to be read. So the first one that I finished was The 7-Year Slip. I actually picked this up because Haley Pham really liked it, and I've recently started watching her videos. My little sister's been talking about her for years, but I haven't started watching her until I was watching Ryan Trahan's and her, the 50 States in 50 Days. So I picked this up. She called it the I would love you in any lifetime trope. I didn't know how I was going to feel about this. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. I cruised through it. I was choosing workouts where I could read during it, so like stationary bike or treadmill, so that I could read. I think I'd rate this like a 4, I think. I don't think it was quite a 5-star for me like it was for her, but I did really enjoy this one. The next one that I finished was not that one. It was actually this one. It's Stars at Last by Jessica Jocelyn. It's the poetry one that I had talked about in my previous video. I have never really sat down and just consumed poetry. I think this was my first book of poetry that I've read instead of individual poems. I liked this one. I don't think that this one would necessarily speak to the masses in ways that other poetry might, but it's just about Jessica and how she finds healing by having her own child from her childhood. And one of the poems that really stood out to me was called My Girlhood Is You. It's about her daughter, but she says, I feel my soul has been plagiarized as she spins and spins. And I just really loved that line. I have a kid, and it's really fun to see parts of me in my kid. It's funny the mannerisms that are just like written into the DNA, because it's stuff that my kid has never even seen me do, but they do the same mannerisms. So I really liked that line. I do think this was good, and depending on the person, I would 100% recommend it. I just don't think that it would necessarily speak to everybody. So that's my review on that. The next book was The Law by Frederick Bastiat. This is I don't know how to pronounce it still. This was the book that I read because my dad had wanted me to read it. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it because my dad wanted me to. I don't think this is gonna be, I don't think I'll ever reread this. I don't necessarily feel like it changed my life the way that my dad loves it, but it was quick. This was written in, I think, the 1850s in France, and a lot of what he talks about from his political beliefs just don't quite fit into the world we live in today. It's a very different world with like problems and just all of it. So I don't think that it was necessarily relevant for me, but I'm glad I read it, and I can talk to my dad about this now. And it was on my physical TBR shelf, so that's one more that I can check off. These two were also on my physical TBR shelf, so I feel good. I've already read 3 of the, I can't remember, I think it's in the 50s. And then the one that I finished last night is called The Husbands. This was not on my physical TBR shelf. It was on my virtual TBR shelf. I had wanted to check it out maybe late last year, and my library system actually didn't have it, and I didn't feel like it was worth it to try to get an interlibrary loan. But I was there last week. Yeah, last week, because I don't even know what day it is. I was there last week, and they had it on the shelf. It was just kind of sitting there open. Like I didn't have to look for it. It was just displayed. So I have wanted to read this one, and I felt like it was my chance. I was a little bit disappointed. It was a really fun idea. So the back says, when Lauren returns home to her flat in London late one night, she's greeted at the door by her husband, Michael. There's only one problem. She's not married. She's never seen this man before in her life, but according to her friends, her much improved decor, and the photos on her phone, they've been together for years. As Lauren tries to puzzle out how she could be married to someone she can't remember meeting, Michael goes to the attic to change a light bulb and abruptly disappears. In his place, a new man emerges. Well, I don't know why I'm so out of breath right now. And a new, slightly altered life reforms around her. Realizing that her addict is creating an infinite supply of husbands, Lauren confronts the question. If swapping lives is as easy as changing a light bulb, how do you know you've taken the right path? When do you stop trying to do better and start actually living? I don't know why it sounded like I was gonna cry. One of the reviews on the back says Groundhog Day meets Bridget Jones' Diary in a screwball setup. I was really excited about this book. Really, it felt like I had a lot of promise. It felt like the type of story I like. I enjoy magical realism. It's, let's see how many pages. It is 338 pages, and around 230, 250, I was ready for it to be done. It just kind of felt like it kept going, which I guess now that I'm reading the Groundhog Day part, that it fits. I was kind of sick of reading, but I wanted to get to the conclusion. So it was good enough that I didn't want to DNF it, but I considered skipping pages, and I don't skip pages in books. I also feel like around that time, the plot, it kind of started to change. She had kind of just like a realization of what she needed to do in her life. The ending, it wasn't a good enough payoff for me to have forced myself through the like 100 pages where I was dragging. It's a quick read. I feel like I read it in like 2 or 3 sittings, but I didn't love the ending. I felt disappointed. I will say, if you kind of like rom-com styles, if you're into magical realism, I think it might be worth picking up, but if it's your first foray into either of those, I don't think that this would be worth it. So kind of a bummer. I would say like 3.5 stars. The concept is unique. It's cool. I've never seen that before. But yeah, it started to really drag. So that's where I'm at right now. 3 of the 4 were on my physical TBR shelf. So I'd say we're making progress. I'm excited about the other books I'll be reading in July. The next one I'm reading will be Lessons in Chemistry, and I've only heard good things about this, so we'll see how that one is. Okay, editing Samantha back again. The second correction, or I guess not really correction, but second thought that I wanted to say is I finished The Husbands a week or 2 ago, and I have actually thought about it more than I expected to. I will say I did want it to be over about 100 pages before it ended, but the more I'm removed from the book, I do feel like maybe that was the author's intention, is at some point you have to just choose a life, and the decisions that you didn't make aren't your business, and so you have to just embrace the life that you chose, I guess. And I see the point more now that I'm removed from actually reading the book. I will say, having those thoughts, I still don't feel like the ending was a good enough payoff for me. I wanted it to be a more romantic ending than it was. I felt kind of similar in that book, the way I felt when I was reading The Old Man and the Sea, which, if you know me personally, you know that's actually a really bad thing, because that's one of my least favorite books that I've ever read. I finished The Old Man and the Sea, and I was furious. I'm actually still mad that that's the ending of The Old Man and the Sea, and I think I feel that way a little bit with The Husbands, but maybe not that much of an extent to it. But so I did want to say, having removed myself, I have thought about it, and I feel like the author was trying to make a point. So maybe I would recommend it a little bit higher than I would have when I first finished it, but we'll see. Okay, I just finished my workout. I was reading this during it, and I'm on page, let's see, 165. I love it. I love it. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a 5-star read for me, but I guess we'll have to see when I finish it. Okay, the next one, and I cannot wait to talk about this one, that I read was Lessons in Chemistry. I actually had never even heard of it, and then I saw that Brie Larson, I think, was in the show, and the show seemed interesting. I still haven't watched it, but then I found out it was a book, and I was like, oh, I should probably read the book before I watch the series. And then my sister Erin had read it and just really loved it, and then my mom read it and really loved it. And I think I was like 50 pages in, and I was thinking, this is gonna be a 5-star for me. And I'm really picky. I do not give 5 stars very often or very easily. Like, I have to absolutely love, 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 love the book. And this one, it did it. It was 5 stars. I read a lot when I work out just because I have a toddler and it's a good time to kind of like kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And one morning I woke up at 5 a.m. to work out, and I never work out in the morning just so that I could read this book. I think I read it in like 2.5 days. I think it was like 3 sittings. For trigger warnings, there is essay in this. I'm pretty sensitive to any book with essay. I typically won't even keep a book if it has that in it. Like, it has to really be justified in the book to have it in it for me to keep it. And there were 2 instances where one was and one was an attempt. I will say the second one was very brief, and you're hearing it from her perspective, obviously, and she's just like so nonplussed that I don't think I felt as sensitive as I typically do in those scenes. The first one, I think I skipped like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and I don't feel like it took away from the book at all by skipping those paragraphs. Phenomenal. It's a phenomenal book. I closed it when I finished it, and I thought I could honestly just like reread that right now. It was so amazing. This is my sister's copy. I will be buying a copy so that I own my own copy. That's how good it is. You follow Elizabeth Zott and her life. It's the 1960s. She wants to be a chemist, but it's the 1960s. So it's just kind of her life going through, like trying to be a chemist, and my camera will not stay straight. Okay, I can't tell. But you're just following her at different stages in her life. So you see when she kind of starts out, and you see when it's a little bit later in her life, and it's really fun. She's a really, really fun character to read about. I will say I looked this up, or I went to like say that I read it on Storygraph and Goodreads. I use both of those. And it's listed as historical fiction, which I guess I didn't really understand what historical fiction was. And yeah, so it's historical fiction. It's just really good. Really good. You understand her emotions so well. I think she's a really endearing main character. I think that most of the characters in the book are endearing, and you feel for them and you want good things to be happening to them. It's incredibly well written, and I think the plot is a good plot also. So this is a 5-star book. I loved this book. I would recommend this book to anybody. I'm so excited to own my own copy. So that's how I feel about this one. Okay, the next one that I picked up after Lessons in Chemistry, which I always feel bad for a book after I read a 5-star book, because I just feel like I'm not gonna like it as much. I almost want it to be the other book. Sometimes I think of it like John Adams. I feel like no matter how good of a president he was, he wasn't George Washington, and he was just kind of like out of luck the second he got the presidentship. But it was one by Meg Mitchell Moore, which I had talked about Vacationland and Mansion Beach previously, and I had really liked Mansion Beach at the end. I feel like I'm still thinking about it, and then I didn't love Vacationland. It was just totally average, and so I started this one a couple nights ago. It's called Two Truths and a Lie. I got 50 pages in, which is my threshold if I'm going to keep reading a book or not, and I felt like she had technically introduced a lot of suspense. Like, I should have been wanting to know what was happening and what was going to happen next and what the secrets were. And I actually didn't feel a lot of desire to find out. Like, I put it down, I went to bed, and the next morning I wasn't really thinking about it. And so I DNF'd this book. It's a library book. It was on my TBR list, so I can just cross it off and count it as one. But I don't know. It just, after how well written Lessons in Chemistry was, I did not enjoy this one. And so it's gone, it's out, I'm returning it to the library, and then we'll see which one I read next. I just started the Afterlife Project, and in it the main characters so far is going through different historical figures, and one of them is Leif Erikson, and I 100% thought that SpongeBob made up Leif Erikson. So that's where I'm at with this book so far. The next book that I read in July was The Afterlife Project by Tim Weed. My little sister recommended this to me. I'm not sure how she found it, but when she was reading it, I felt like her and I had a lot of really good conversations that ended up, I realized, being about topics adjacent to this book. It is science fiction, which I enjoy a science fiction book. But in it, you're following two different timelines. So one is roughly 2068 our time, and it's the end of humanity as we know it. So you're kind of watching one specific set of scientists as they are trying to save Homo sapiens as we know them. But there was a hyper pandemic that left a lot of the population infertile, and they are hoping that they can find someone who's still fertile, because without fertility, the population dies off. Then you're following another timeline, which is about 10,000 years in the future, and there's a man who we find out to be from our timeline, and he, I guess I shouldn't say timeline, I feel like that means something different, but time period, he has been preserved by this group of scientists to wake up 10,000 years later. Hopefully the world is still existing, and hopefully he can continue on humanity. And the small group of scientists that you're following are trying to find a fertile female. And then he is just kind of hoping that there is humanity left, that he's not the last human left on Earth. This was just like a really poignant book. I don't think I'm ready to give it 5 stars, but depending on how much I think about it in the coming days, I may change my rating to 5 stars. But right now, I think it's like 4.5, 4.75 stars. This was incredibly well written. I felt like you could feel the emotions so intensely. The other part of this book that I think made it more poignant, which I think this is a newer book. Oh yeah, copyright 2025. So I think I don't even think there was a hard copy. I think it might have been released this year, but they're following a hyper pandemic, and at one point it follows a character, and he said, I put this on. Oh, it says he was fortunate to find himself aboard one of the last commercial flights ever scheduled. And I feel like that sentence kind of stopped me in my tracks, because my husband and I were living in Milan, Italy when COVID-19 broke out. And we were actually on one of the last 2 commercial flights out of Milan. And so I felt like reading that sentence, all of a sudden I was thrust into the world as we knew it in 2020. And a lot of the descriptions in this, I think he kind of borrowed from what happened in 2020. I think a lot of us can relate to living through pandemic with the hyper pandemic. Another theme that it really talks about a lot is how time is not really linear, which is a theory that I have loved to explore. And so I think that was really fun. But they bring up on multiple different points how time isn't really linear. So even though humanity's ending, we still have hope, we still have love, like all the memories that existed will still exist. The other theme that really stuck out to me was just the loneliness of being potentially the last human left on Earth, and just he kind of starts to go crazy as he's trying to find people. At one point he says, "Is it reality, hallucination, or the harbinger of approaching insanity?" And I think I think it's really poignant, because we're in a loneliness epidemic right now, and a lot of people in our society are incredibly lonely. And I think that you can, through loneliness, feel like you're actually losing your mind. And so I just, that line stopped me in my tracks. And then, let's see, I'm trying to find the ones I really want to talk about. What was special about this copy is my little sister annotated it, and I always love reading her books that she's annotated, because I almost feel like she's reading it to me, and we're having discussions as I read it, even though she read it at a different point. It talks a lot about different versions of home, and how home is more than just a place, but it's feelings, it's people, it's kind of reality as we know it, which I really liked. And he said, one of the lines, we're following the single man 10,000 years in the future, and it says something about being lost, cold, and hungry, and then finding his way back, not to any kind of home, but to this place of darkness and claustrophobic memory, where nothing but ghosts await him, no lover, no friends, no children or grandchildren, no weddings, no birthdays, not even eventually the prospect of a lightly attended funeral. And I think that paragraph sums up how lonely he really felt in this moment. Like he needed to get to his shelter, but it wasn't really much of a home. And throughout the exploration on loneliness, he goes back and forth between thinking, should I remember everything in my past, or should I just let it lie? And at times you realize that he needs to remember it to have hope, and at other times he's like, I truly emotionally can't handle remembering that. This quote also stuck out to me. I didn't fact check that the Dalai Lama actually said this, but it says, what was it that old incarnation of the Dalai Lama used to say? Participate joyfully in the sorrows of the world. I love that. I really, really love that line. And my little sister had actually underlined it twice. I hope I'm not like sharing things that she doesn't want me to share, but she'd underlined it twice. I think right now I'm struggling because there's so many sorrows in the world, and especially going into public policy and law, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of the sorrows, and it's hard on the spirit, but participate joyfully. So I really liked that. And then at one point it's back into 2068, so basically our time, and it brings up, it says a gang of nihilists out for an ends time joyride. It appeared, and my little sister wrote, nihilist as the opposite of hopeful. Time is now is time is always. And I think that's a really concise way of summing up kind of the theme of time in this book, but also hope in this book, because I think you have to have hope, and you have to recognize in this book that the time that's existing currently is existing in the future. I read a lot of sci-fi, and I feel like, I think that this one was written, the actual writing, I think, was a higher caliber than most sci-fi books that I've read. And then 2, I think it explored themes that a lot of the science fiction that I've read hasn't. It was very like close to home. He describes emotions that I think we've all felt from time to time, and I thought that made it particularly special. And so, like I said, I'm not quite ready to give it a 5-star rating, but I am open to changing my mind. But this was I'm really glad I read this book.